They say that families are forever, but mine taught me something very different. Families, like fortunes, can be taken away in the blink of an eye or a flick of a pen. My name is Ava Sinclair. And the day my grandfather was lowered into the ground, my place in the Sinclair family died with him. It began with the reading of the will. The mahogany-panelled library smelled of old books and whiskey. Everyone sat stiffly in antique chairs that hadn't been dusted in months, some of them still pretending to mourn, others silently calculating what they'd walk away with. I sat beside my Aunt Eleanor, who had the decency to pretend like she didn't hate me, unlike my cousin Jason, who smirked every time someone so much as glanced my way. Grandfather had been a hard man, but he loved me in his own quiet way. I spent more time with him than any of his other grandchildren, studying business plans, touring the vineyards, attending investor meetings. While the rest of them treated him like an ATM, I treated him like a mentor. I thought that meant something. God. I was naive. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. This is the last will and testament of Howard Sinclair. I didn't hear most of it. My heart was pounding. I didn't need much, I wasn't greedy. I just wanted acknowledgement. Validation that all those years I gave up for the family meant something. And then I heard it. To my beloved grandson, Jason Sinclair, I leave the controlling shares of Sinclair Estate Holdings, as well as the family mansion and vineyards. Wait, Jason. I blinked, certain I misheard. And to Ava Sinclair. My name. Finally. I leave my antique book collection and $10,000. $10,000. A few gasps sounded in the room. My aunt avoided my gaze. Jason leaned back, arms crossed smugly, tapping his foot like he couldn't wait to see how I'd react. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I simply nodded and whispered, "Thank you," though my voice cracked halfway. But inside, something shattered. Not just because of the insultingly small inheritance, but because I knew it wasn't real. It couldn't be. My grandfather had told me I was the future of the company. We had meetings about expansion plans, growth projections. He even said he wanted me to run things when he passed. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a lie, and I wasn't going to let it go. I didn't cry. Not then. Not when I shook hands with people who barely remembered my name. Not when Jason walked past me and muttered, "Guess he finally saw you for what you really are." I waited until I got back to my apartment, small, modest, quiet. And then I fell apart. I tore off the black dress I had spent hours picking. I collapsed onto the couch and buried my face in a pillow and screamed until my throat burned. $10,000. After everything. After staying up late drafting pitch decks. After managing accounts when Jason was too hungover to show up. After missing holidays, relationships, and time, my life. Gone. Just like that. I stayed there for hours, curled in a ball, feeling worthless. But then, something happened. As the streetlights flickered through my window, casting amber shadows across the room. I sat up, and I remembered something. A conversation I had with my grandfather 6 months before he died. We were walking the vineyard. After a long board meeting, he'd just praised my expansion strategy. "You're the only one who gets it, Ava," he'd said. "One day this will all be yours. Not because you're my granddaughter, but because you earned it." So, what had changed? I reached for my old journal, the one I used to jot down everything: business notes, feelings, warnings. And there it was. A note from that very day. A reminder in the margin. Get lawyer to update joint partnership docs. Talk to Granddad about pattern ownership transfer. Review old holding companies. My hands trembled. I hadn't thought about those conversations in months. Suddenly, I wasn't just angry. I was curious. And that was the first spark. That was when the wheels started turning. I knew my grandfather. And I knew Jason. My gut screamed this will have been manipulated. But more than that. Even if it hadn't been, I still had something they didn't. I had knowledge. And I had proof. Jason might have gotten a will. But I had something better. I had receipts. And I was going to use every single one. The next morning, I woke up with a hangover of emotions, shame, betrayal, fury. But underneath it all, I felt something sharper, clearer, a purpose. I made coffee. Like I always did, but this time, I didn't sip it and stare blankly out the window. I took it to my desk, opened my old laptop, and began pulling up everything I could find: emails, documents, files I hadn't touched in years. If they thought I would walk away quietly, they didn't know me at all. The Sinclair estate didn't rise because of Jason's charm or my aunt's fake philanthropy. It rose because I'd been the invisible backbone holding everything together. I started with the vineyard patents. Years ago, I developed a temperature monitoring system with a local engineer to help reduce spoilage during unpredictable weather. Jason mocked it, called it overkill. Grandfather loved it. It saved the company thousands each season. The patent? Registered under my name. I smiled for the first time in days. Not just because I still owned it, but because I remembered how Jason once bragged about using the system in his new export model. I pulled the contract. His entire shipping framework was built around it. Perfect. Next, I dug into the holding companies. Years ago, during expansion, I suggested we register certain assets under separate entities to reduce liability. Grandfather had agreed. He let me form the LLCs and I handled the filings. I opened the records. Sinclair Reserve Logistics, Granwin International Trade, AVH Fineworks. 3 still registered with me as managing director. That was about 60% of their logistics and import channels. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. How had they missed this? Then it hit me. They didn't care. They thought I'd roll over, that I'd be too heartbroken to fight. Or worse, they thought I was too nice to burn it all down. Well, they were about to meet the real Ava. I picked up my phone and called the only person who'd ever believed in me more than grandfather. Claire? I said as she answered grudgingly. Ava, what time is it? Are you okay? I paused. No, but I'm going to be. I need your help. Claire had been my assistant for 6 years. When I left the company to go independent last year, she stayed behind. We remained close. I trusted her with my life. And more importantly, she had eyes and ears inside Sinclair Holdings. I need you to confirm something for me, I said, pacing. Did Jason roll out the cold ship program I developed? Yeah, last month. He said it was a revolutionary move, she added with a bitter laugh. Everyone knew it was your project, but you weren't around to defend it. Good, I said. That means he's in violation of IP laws. She went quiet. Oh my God. Ava, you're going after them. Not just them, I said. All of it. I'm taking everything I built, everything they stole, and I'm going to make sure they feel every missing piece. Claire exhaled like she was processing what I'd just declared. You want help? I want justice. And I need someone. On the inside. Without hesitation, she said, Then I'm in. That night, I went through my financials. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't broke either. I still had consulting clients, and that $10,000 pity gift from the will could at least fund my legal retainer. I needed a lawyer who understood both corporate law and family betrayal. Enter Julian Hayes, Julian and I had worked together, briefly during a merger 5 years ago. He had the look of a man who knew too much and trusted too little, a quality I found strangely comforting. He took one look at my files, whistled low and said, "They screwed up. Can I sue them?" I asked. "Oh, absolutely," he said, flipping through pages. "But it'll take time, and they'll fight back dirty." "I don't need to sue them right now," I said, voice steady. "I just need to start reclaiming what's mine." Julian leaned in. "You want to dismantle it from the inside," I nodded. "I don't want revenge, Julian. I want restoration. They erased me. I'm going to make them remember who I am." He smiled, slow and dangerous. "Then let's get started." 3 weeks later, the first domino fell. Sinclair Reserve Logistics, which Jason had been using for international shipping, was suddenly flagged for unauthorized use of proprietary technology. Julian filed a cease and desist on my behalf. Jason ignored it. So I shut it down. Literally. With my authority as managing director, I revoked all active transport licenses. Containers filled with $4 million worth of product were stuck at sea. Jason called me within hours. "You think this is funny?" he barked. "Not at all," I said calmly. "I think it's tragic that someone in your position doesn't even read the contracts tied to his company. You're playing a dangerous game." "Ava," I laughed. "No, Jason. I invented the game. You just stole the board and assumed I wouldn't notice." He hung up. I could practically hear him seething. And I wasn't done yet. Next came Granwin International Trade. I froze the accounts and redirected all payments back to my private holding account per my rights as founding shareholder. By month's end, Jason was bleeding money. But he couldn't publicly blame me, not without admitting how much of the empire was tied to me. Exactly how I wanted it. Claire sent me regular updates from inside. You should have seen his face at the board meeting. She whispered one day, "He's unraveling. And your aunt? She's scrambling to figure out how to get their name off a sinking ship." I didn't enjoy their pain. Not really. What I enjoyed was the clarity. For so long, I thought I needed their approval to feel worthy. Now I saw the truth. They needed me to survive. And that was more satisfying than any inheritance ever could be. Asterisk people often say that the strongest revenge is silence. But I didn't stay quiet to be poetic. I stayed quiet because the less noise I made, the more damage I could do without anyone noticing. Jason was unraveling publicly, and I was thriving privately. But there was one piece I hadn't touched yet: my Aunt Eleanor. The woman who once braided my hair when my mother passed away. Who taught me how to tie a scarf for high society brunches. Who also sat stone-faced at the reading of the will while I was erased from my legacy. Claire had been feeding me whispers, subtle things. Eleanor was trying to call emergency board meetings. She was pushing Jason to clean up his act. But it wasn't out of guilt or morality. It was fear. Fear that the empire she had manipulated her way into would vanish. Because Jason was the face. But Eleanor? She was the puppeteer. And I knew she had secrets of her own. I called Julian. "It's time to look into Eleanor Sinclair." "Thought you'd never ask," he said with a chuckle. 2 days later he called back. "You're going to love this." I waited, pen in hand, though I wasn't taking notes. I just liked the weight of it between my fingers. Like a sword in disguise. Eleanor has been siphoning donations from the Sinclair Children's Trust into private shell accounts. I blinked. What? She's been laundering money through a fake non-profit. Looks like Jason's not the only fraud in the family. That was the final straw. The Sinclair Children's Trust was something I created, me, after I visited a foster center in Newark and couldn't sleep for 3 nights. Thinking about the conditions those kids lived in. My grandfather loved the idea. Even added more funding. But clearly Eleanor loved something more: greed. I want her exposed, I said. Julian hesitated. If we go that route, things could get really messy. Public messy. Are you ready for that? I paused. Then I thought about my name being read like a footnote in that will. I thought about the $10,000 they tossed me like a bone to a dog. I thought about every birthday I spent working while Jason was in Ibiza. I was born ready. The next step wasn't just legal, it was surgical. I met with one of my old contacts in the media. I won't name her, but let's just say she owed me a favor from a scandal I helped her hush during my days in PR consulting. I gave her the files. Every transfer, every forged document, every false receipt. I didn't tell her what to write. I didn't have to. She called me the next day. This is gold. It's going live Monday. And on Monday morning, headlines exploded. Charity queen Ava Sinclair under investigation for fraud. Millions missing from Children's Trust founder. Ava Sinclair speaks out. Is the Sinclair family empire crumbling from within? I didn't give interviews. I didn't pose for photos. Released a quiet statement through Julian's office. The Children's Trust was created out of love and responsibility. I'm deeply saddened to see it exploited. All I want is to restore what was lost. The public adored it. Eleanor didn't. She tried to call me the next day. I stared at the screen for 10 rings. Watched her name flash over and over. Then finally I answered. Hello, Aunt Eleanor, I said calmly. Why are you doing this? She hissed. Do you know what this is doing to our family's name? I almost laughed. You mean the family? That erased me. You think this will get you back in the will? I don't want your scraps, I said. I want the truth. I want justice. And I want everyone to know that I never needed a seat at your table. I was the table. She hung up. But I wasn't done yet. Jason was next. Claire told me he'd been avoiding the office, claiming mental health reasons, while secretly trying to liquidate assets to cover shipping losses. I already anticipated that. So I bought the debts. That's right. I bought the loans under a blind corporate front. And then I called him. Jason, I said sweetly. Just wanted to let you know your loan's been called in. You have 7 days. You can't do that, he shouted. I can, I replied. And I did. He broke then. Voice cracked, pleading. Come on, Ava, we're family. Family. That word tasted bitter in my mouth. You should have remembered that before you forged Granddad's signature on the revised will. Silence. Then a long, slow exhale. You can't prove that, he finally said. But his voice trembled. Maybe not, I said. But I don't have to. All I need is for the board to believe I can. And believe me, they already hate how badly you've wrecked the company. That night, I sat in my apartment. The lights low, soft jazz playing in the background. I wasn't celebrating yet. Not because I wasn't winning, but because winning wasn't enough. They had stripped me of more than money. They had tried to make me feel invisible, replaceable. But now the world was seeing me again. The real me. I looked in the mirror, not for vanity but for clarity. And I saw her. The woman I always was beneath the bruises. Strong, strategic, silent when necessary, and unstoppable when provoked. Wasn't just coming for revenge anymore. I was coming for legacy. ****. When people think about revenge, they picture fire, dramatic, loud, explosive. But true revenge? The kind that lasts? That isn't fire. It's water. Silent. Patient, undeniable. You never see it until your foundation is already rotted through. And that's what Jason and Eleanor were starting to realize. The media was still buzzing. My quiet statement had struck a nerve. Donations to the Sinclair Children's Trust had tripled in 2 weeks, all redirected to a clean, new nonprofit I'd created under my full name, the Ava Sinclair Foundation. People saw me now, not as the black sheep, not as the disinherited granddaughter, but as the builder, the reformer, the one who was cleaning up a corrupt dynasty with poise and power. That the best was yet to come. Claire sent me a text one night. Board is panicking. I want a leadership vote. Eleanor's stepping down. Jason's isolated. There's an opening. An opening. I knew what that meant. Jason had no allies left. So I did what they never expected. I showed up, walked into the boardroom like I owned it, because in truth I did. Or at least, I had built enough of it to make everyone uncomfortable. That was power. The directors all turned when I entered. Some looked shocked. Some ashamed. A few looked relieved. Jason sat at the head of the long oak table, suit rumpled, eyes red from what I could only assume were nights spent grasping at the remains of control. Ava, he said with a thin smile. Didn't expect you to show. I never left, I said coolly, taking a seat near the middle. I was just watching from where it mattered. The chairman of the board, Mr. Yates, cleared his throat. Miss Sinclair, your presence today is unexpected. Is it? I asked, sliding a folder toward him. Inside are the transfer agreements for 3 subsidiaries I built and own: Granwin, Sinclair Reserve, and a VH Vineworks. All 3 of which, as of this morning, I've decided to sell. To Sinclair Holdings. Jason perked up. You're selling? That's what this is about? Money? I raised a brow. Let me finish. Mr. Yates opened the folder, reading me. Fine print, and blinked. These are conditional purchase agreements. I smiled. Yes, my terms are simple. I'll return those assets to the company under a fair market price, but only if the board reinstates me as executive chairwoman. Jason stood. This is blackmail. It's business, I replied, meeting his eyes. You should try it sometime. The room fell into a tense silence. One of the older directors, a man who'd served alongside my grandfather for years, finally spoke. I vote in favor. Another followed. Then another. And just like that, Jason's empire cracked. When the final vote was cast, it was unanimous. Jason was out. I was in. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger or triumph. I just felt clarity. You forgot one thing, Jason, I said softly. You don't inherit power. You earn it. And I earned every inch of this empire while you were out throwing parties and forging trust funds. He looked at me with dead eyes. You think this makes you better than me? No, I said. I know it does. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I cleaned house, hired real accountants, repaired supplier relationships, restructured the board to include diversity and ethics advisors. I even brought back some former employees who had been fired for clashing with leadership, which I now understood was code for telling the truth. And the best part? I reopened the Sinclair Children's Trust, this time under federal monitoring and direct oversight from a committee of social workers and child welfare specialists. Every dollar accounted for, every child seen. I wasn't just reclaiming what they stole from me. I was turning it into something better. One evening, as I locked up the estate office, my new office eye saw a familiar car pull up. Eleanor stepped out. She looked older, worn. No makeup, no pretense. I should have walked away. But I waited. She approached slowly. I heard about the vote. I'm sure you did. She looked down at her shoes. I didn't expect you to come back. I know. Long silence. Then she said, Do you hate me? I considered the question. No, I said at last. I don't hate you. I just don't need you. She flinched at that, and I turned to walk away. Because forgiveness isn't weakness. It's freedom, and I was finally free. Back in my office, I poured a glass of wine vintage 2012. One of the last harvests I helped oversee with Granddad. I held it up to the light and smiled. This one's for you, I whispered Dot, and maybe, just maybe, he was watching. Maybe he finally saw that everything he built had been in the right hands all along. After the vote, something strange happened. People started calling me ma'am. Journalists requested interviews. Former enemies sent congratulatory emails laced with fake warmth. Old family friends began inviting me to events again, galas, charity auctions, garden luncheons. But I wasn't the same Ava they remembered. I didn't show up to be praised. I didn't need their polished compliments or performative approval. Because now, I knew who I was, and I was done shrinking. I had inherited nothing and still rebuilt everything. And that was a story no socialite brunch could ever understand. Still, I couldn't deny the symbolism of it all the way the city now whispered my name again. But this time with reverence, not dismissal. It felt good. But it wasn't why I came back. My real work started behind the scenes. I appointed a new CFO, one who had grown up in foster care and understood how wealth should serve purpose, not power. I dissolved every shady offshore account Jason and Eleanor had created. It cost the company in the short term, but long term, it rebuilt our reputation from the ground up. I hosted a meeting with all vineyard workers. Not from behind a podium, but in the fields, wearing boots and gloves like I used to when I was 23, and just learning to graft vines, listen to their grievances. I raised wages. I offered tuition assistance for their kids. And I established the Ava Sinclair Workers' Fund, named not to romanticize the man, but to remind the company that even patriarchs can plant good seeds if tended by the right hands. Then came something I didn't expect. A letter. It arrived at my new estate. Mailbox handwritten. Wax dash sealed. From my cousin Jason. My first instinct was to throw it away. Burn it. Ignore it like he had ignored me during that smug smirk at the will reading. But something about the handwriting stopped me. I opened it. Ava, I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't deserve it. You were always better than me. I just couldn't see it, because I was too busy believing I was entitled to everything you earned. You beat me, and I'm not writing to fight that. I'm writing to say that I finally see it. Maybe this fall was what I needed to finally become someone decent. I'm leaving the country for a while. Getting help. I hope you keep building something that makes people proud. Jason. I read it twice, then a third time. It didn't undo what he did. It didn't change the fact that he stole my place, forged the signature, and watched me be erased with glee. But it was human. And for the first time, I felt the tiniest flicker of sympathy. I placed the letter in the drawer, not to keep, not to forgive, but to remember. Not all enemies wear capes. Some wear your last name. Weeks turned into months. The estate flourished under new leadership. The foundation built schools. We partnered with independent farms and startups. We removed the Sinclair name from every building that didn't match our values. And slowly, I began to feel something strange. Peace. One afternoon, I visited my mother's grave for the first time in years. I knelt by the headstone, simple, beautiful, etched with vines. I did it, Mom. I whispered. I traced the edge of the granite and smiled. I lost everything, and I got it back on my own. A breeze rustled through the trees and I felt her. Then came the final twist. Julian called me one evening with a strange tone in his voice. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "What now?" I asked. He chuckled. "Turns out, your grandfather did leave you more." "What?" "There was a second will, signed and witnessed. He never revoked the first, but he updated it. Just never submitted it officially, because get this, he had a stroke that same week." I sat down. "And in that version," Julian continued, "he names you as full heir, controlling shares, assets, everything." I blinked. "But I already reclaimed it. I don't need the will." "I know," he said, "that now you have proof, legal, undeniable proof, that it was always meant to be yours." I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. "File it," I whispered. "Not for revenge, but for the record. Because legacy isn't about money. It's about truth. And the truth was my grandfather saw me all along. They just couldn't erase what had already been written in legacy's ink." That night, I walked through the vineyard as the sun set golden light bathing the fields. I had once walked as a girl with dirt under her nails and dreams in her heart. I walked as a woman with power in her spine and justice in her hands. They tried to silence me with paper. I answered with purpose. And the world listened. ****. You would think that once you win, once justice is served and your name is cleared, you feel whole again. But no one tells you that revenge, even when justified, is never the end. It's a doorway. And walking through it means confronting not just the people who hurt you, but the version of yourself that let them. I had rebuilt the empire, reclaimed the assets, exposed the fraud, made the headlines. But there was one thing still missing. For so long, I had operated from pain, from anger, from the sense that I wasn't enough unless I proved something to everyone who doubted me. And now, there was nothing left to prove. That's when I started dreaming again, not just about business, but about life. So I took a step I hadn't allowed myself in years. I booked a flight. Not for work, not for networking, just to breathe. I landed in Florence, Italy, on a quiet spring morning. It was a city I had always wanted to visit, ever since I saw photos of it in a worn magazine on my grandmother's coffee table. Back then, I thought, someday. Now I decided, why not today? I walked the cobblestone streets alone, ate pasta in silence under a balcony blooming with purple wisteria, sat on the edge of the Arno River, and let the wind tangle my hair while street musicians played Vivaldi. I didn't check emails. I didn't return press calls. I just existed. It was intoxicating. One night, I wandered into a tiny bookstore tucked between two espresso bars. The owner, a wrinkled woman with eyes like polished wood, welcomed me without a word and handed me a journal with a leather cover. I don't know why, but I bought it. And in the hotel room that night, I wrote for hours. Not strategy, not timelines, not asset transfers. Just thoughts. Memories. Healing. I wrote about my mother's laugh, my grandfather's shadow, the first time I held a grape in my hand and imagined turning it into something more. I wrote about Jason, his betrayal, his apology, his silence. I wrote about Eleanor, how the woman who once taught me to set a dinner table also taught me how to survive a knife in the back. But most of all, I wrote about myself. Not Ava the executive, not Ava the survivor, just Ava. Girl who loved books, wind, and solving impossible puzzles. When I returned home 2 weeks later, I had no grand plan, no announcement, no press release, just clarity. I resumed my role at the company, but I delegated more, trusted others, took long walks without my phone. I reconnected with people I'd lost touch with, college friends, an old mentor, even an ex who had reached out with a simple "Saw your name in the news. Proud of you." And slowly, the version of me that had been buried under years of ambition and hurt began to rise again. Not softer, but lighter. Then came something unexpected. One of the board members, a woman named Cynthia, who had voted me in, approached me after a quarterly meeting. "I have a proposal," she said, handing me a folder. It was a plan to open a new wing of the company focused on women-led ventures. Funding, mentorship, and partnership opportunities for women building family businesses, like I had. Cynthia watched me with careful eyes. "You've built something rare, Ava. Not just a comeback story, but a blueprint. People are watching. What you do next matters." I studied the folder. My name already printed at the top of the mock logo. It hit me like a quiet THUNDERCLAP. I had started this journey wanting to restore a legacy. Now, I had a chance to create one. My own. We launched the Sinclair Women's Initiative 6 months later. First cohort included 15 women ranging from a single mom in Detroit, building a tech startup, to a vineyard manager from Chile looking for sustainable export routes. I met every one of them personally. Listened. Learned. Shared. I didn't speak from a podium. I sat with them, rolled up my sleeves, gave them the tools I never had, and reminded them of what I'd almost forgotten. That power isn't given. It's built. And it's stronger when shared. The day we cut the ribbon on the new foundation headquarters, I wore my mother's scarf and my grandfather's old watch. The press took photos, applauded, but the moment that stays with me isn't the camera flashes. It was the final girl in line, just 21, wearing thrift store heels and shaking with nerves. She handed me a letter. "You changed everything for me," she said. "I saw your story, and I realized I wasn't crazy for wanting more." I held her hand, looked her in the eyes, and smiled. "You were never crazy," I told her. "You were just early." After the foundation launch, things changed. Not overnight. Not with fireworks or fanfare. But with a quiet kind of power. A knowing. People no longer introduced me as Howard Sinclair's granddaughter. Now they simply said, "That's Ava Sinclair." My name, not borrowed, not inherited, not attached to someone else. Mine. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking in anyone's shadow. Not my grandfather's legacy, not Jason's entitlement, not my aunt's scheming grip on family hierarchy. I had carved my place in the world with nothing but grit, grace, and fire. But with clarity came responsibility. One afternoon, I was sitting in my corner office overlooking the vineyard. Yes, that same office Jason used to parade investors through like he'd earned it, when Claire knocked gently and walked in with an envelope. She looked different lately, more confident. She'd accepted the role of Director of Strategic Affairs, and honestly, I couldn't have built half of this without her. "This came for you," she said, handing it over. It was from the city registrar's office. I opened it slowly, and my heart skipped. Inside was the official document for a company name change. Ava Sinclair Enterprises, formerly Sinclair Estate Holdings. I let my fingers rest on the edge of the paper. Claire sat down across from me. "You really did it." I looked at her. "We did, because I meant it." She had stood beside me when I had nothing but a few receipts and a bruised heart. And she never once asked me to slow down. Sometimes, family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shares your storm and holds your hand through it. Later that evening, I walked the vineyard again. It had become my ritual, my way to center myself. Even as the world continued buzzing with headlines and merger offers and praise, reached the bench beneath the twisted olive tree where my grandfather once sat smoking his pipe. Staring across the rows of vines. This time, I sat in silence. Then I whispered out loud, "I did what you asked, Granddad. I kept it alive. But I made it mine." No ghosts answered. No wind carried a sign. But I didn't need one. Because I wasn't here to be haunted anymore. I was here to live. That weekend, I hosted something I never thought I would, a Sinclair family gathering. Not to mend everything, not for apologies. But for closure. I invited everyone. Even Eleanor. I didn't expect them all to come. But they did. Even Jason. He looked different, leaner, quieter, still dressed like money, but with a softness behind his eyes. We exchanged a nod. Nothing more. But that nod said everything. I see you. I know what you did. And I've moved on. When the meal ended, I stood and tapped my glass gently. "I'm not going to give a speech," I said. "This isn't about the past." They all stared, waiting. "This is about the future, mine, and maybe yours if you choose it." A pause. No more secrets. No more fighting over names that don't belong to us. If you want to be part of what I'm building, you're welcome. If not, I release you. I sat down. And for the first time in my life, the room didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a choice. Mine. After everyone left, I stood at the window, watching the sun fall over the vineyard. Claire joined me with 2 glasses of wine. "To legacy," she said, raising hers. I touched mine to hers gently. "No," I said with a smile. "To beginnings. Because what no one tells you about reclaiming your life is this. Once you burn down the lies, you don't rebuild what was. You plant something new. And it grows not in the shape of your pain, but in the image of your freedom. Asterisk. There's a strange stillness that comes after a storm, when everything is back in place, but nothing feels the same. I had won. The company bore my name. The foundation was thriving. My tormentors had faded into silence or irrelevance. The headlines had moved on. But I wasn't looking for the applause anymore. I was looking inward. And what I found surprised me. Because for years, I had believed that the ultimate goal was power. Control. Reclaiming the throne I was denied. But now that I had it, I realized something deeper. I never wanted the throne. I just wanted the right to sit at the table. I helped build. One Tuesday afternoon, I met with a group of women founders at the Sinclair Innovation Wing, a glass and stone building perched on a hill overlooking the vineyard. One of my proudest projects. The group included a coder from Kenya, a baker from Louisiana, a robotics engineer from Tokyo. They were brilliant, bold, and slightly terrified. "Let me guess," I said with a grin. "You're wondering if you're ready for this." They chuckled nervously. I nodded. I used to wonder that too. Then I realized something. Readiness isn't real. It's a myth told to women to keep us cautious. They leaned in. "You're not here because you're ready. You're here because you're hungry." And that's enough. After the meeting, I stayed behind alone. I walked the halls, running my fingers along the marble walls. My name was engraved at the entrance, not out of ego, but accountability. If I failed, the world would know it was mine to fix, and I was okay with that. That's when I got the call. It was Julian. "You've been nominated," he said. "For what?" "The National Impact Leadership Award." I blinked. "Isn't that for politicians?" "Sometimes. But this year, it's for a woman who dismantled a legacy of corruption, rebuilt an empire, and then used it to uplift others." I didn't speak, because somewhere inside me, the girl who once cried on her apartment floor after being handed $10,000 like an insult was in shock. "I'll send over the forms," Julian added gently. I thought you should. No. Thank you, I said quietly. After we hung up, I walked back outside. The vineyard stretched in front of me like a golden ocean. And I felt it again, that stillness. Not emptiness, not loss. Just a rare, quiet peace. I spent the next few weeks mentoring more women, restructuring the foundation's grants, visiting rural farms, remote classrooms, and forgotten corners of the world where big dreams lived in small bodies. Everywhere I went, people asked the same thing. How did you do it? And every time I gave them the same answer. I didn't wait for permission. But even in triumph, life has a way of humbling you. One rainy morning, I received another envelope. This one wasn't celebratory. It was an obituary. Ava Sinclair, dead at 69. Quietly, no press. No scandal. No redemption arc. She had moved to the countryside, away from the spotlight. Jason had cared for her in her final days, according to a short, impersonal note attached to the announcement. I read it once. Then again. And then I sat down. Not because I was grieving her, but because part of my story was closing. The woman who once tried to erase me was now gone. I didn't cry, but I didn't celebrate either. I just whispered, "Goodbye," and folded the letter into my journal, sealing it between pages of my own truth. That's the thing about villains. They leave behind echoes, but not chains. That night, I stood on the balcony of my estate. The wind was soft. The vines rustled gently. A crescent moon peeked through the clouds, and I whispered something I hadn't dared say before. I'm proud of you, Ava. Not for the fight. Not for the revenge, but for choosing to build when it would have been easier to burn. Because I had become the woman I needed as a girl, and no inheritance in the world could ever top that. Asterisk. Months passed. Seasons change. The vineyard bloomed, then dimmed into autumn. Leaves painted the hills in amber and fire, like nature itself was shedding its past. I felt the shift inside me too. No longer chasing justice, because I'd already won it. No longer obsessed with legacy, because I was living it. Now, I was focused on something else. Continuity, not just building for myself, but ensuring the doors I kicked open stayed open for others, long after I was gone. One day, while finalizing some new investment proposals for women-led farms in Brazil, Claire walked in with a glimmer in her eyes. "You have a visitor," she said. "Anyone I know?" She smiled. "Kind of. She says you won't remember her, but you inspired her years ago at a community college career day." My brow furrowed. I barely remember that event. I was still trying to land my own footing back then. Claire gestured toward the hallway. "She remembered you." The girl, now a young woman, walked into my office with trembling hands and hopeful eyes. "I know this is crazy," she said, "but you once told us that if we had something the world needed, we had a responsibility to bring it forward." I smiled. "That sounds like something I'd say." She laughed nervously, then slid a folder across my desk. Inside were sketches, plans for a soil recycling system that could make small farms more sustainable during drought seasons. I sat up. This is good. It's not perfect yet," she said quickly. "I don't even have a prototype. I just needed someone to tell me I wasn't wasting my time." I looked her in the eye. "You're not." And in that moment I saw myself. Again. Not in the suits I wore now, or the headlines I made, but in her fire, her need to be heard. Her refusal to ask for permission. I wrote her a personal check to fund her prototype. And offered her a seat in the foundation's next cohort. When you've clawed your way to the top, the most powerful thing you can do is build a ladder. Later that week, I took a rare day off. No emails. No phone calls. Just a drive through the countryside in my grandfather's old car, a vintage coupe we'd restored in the garage one summer when I was 12. I parked by a lake I hadn't seen in years. Sat under a tree with a leather notebook. And began writing something new. Not a speech. Not a strategy. A memoir. For me. For the women coming after me. For the ones who never got their chance. I titled it, Dirt Under My Nails. How I Grew a Legacy from Nothing. Because that's what I wanted people to know. That everything they'd seen, the buildings, the titles, the magazine covers, none of it started with inheritance. It started with pain. Then purpose. Then power. In the months that followed, the Sinclair Women's Initiative grew into a global force. We expanded into Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and rural Europe. Our grants funded education, invention, and clean water. But more than anything, we taught something revolutionary. That women don't need to be given a voice. We already have one. We just need systems to stop silencing it. One night, after hosting a dinner with leaders from 10 countries at the estate, I stood on the back terrace alone, barefoot on the stone. Claire joined me quietly, holding 2 glasses of wine. She handed one to me. To your empire, she said. I looked around. The vineyard, the lights, the laughter still echoing from inside. Then I corrected her gently. To our garden, I said. Empires fall, gardens grow. She nodded, smiling, and we toasted in silence, under a sky filled with stars. Asterisk, it's strange how full circle life can feel when you finally stop running. One morning, I stood in the family vineyard, yes, mine, now, and watched the workers begin the harvest. Grapes swollen with late summer sun. The scent of earth, rich and steady. Once, this place was where I felt like a ghost in my own story. Now, I was its author. An invitation arrived in early fall. A national leadership summit. Black tie. With an award. The envelope was thick, expensive. The kind Jason used to collect with a smirk. But this one had my name on it. Ava Sinclair, finalist, National Impact Leadership Award. I stared at the gold embossing, the way the letters shimmered in the light. And something clicked. Not pride. Not vengeance. Just peace. I had outlasted the noise, rewritten the ending, not with destruction but with direction. I didn't need a stage to feel worthy, but I accepted the invitation anyway. Because visibility is power, and sometimes the people who need to see you most are the ones who are still invisible. The gala was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers, soft jazz, cameras flashing politely. When they called my name, I stood and walked to the podium in a black suit tailored to the woman I had become. Sharp, clean, powerful, unbothered. I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't need one. I looked out at the room. Industry giants, politicians, journalists, business leaders. And I told the truth. There was a time I thought being left out of my families was the end of me. I was wrong. That moment was my beginning. Not because I proved them wrong, but because I stopped trying to prove anything at all. And I started building something they never could have imagined. Not a dynasty. A movement. Silence. And then applause, not the kind people give politely, but the kind that says, "We see you." After the gala, I stepped outside into the cold night air. Alone, but not lonely. Not anymore. Claire joined me, arms crossed, watching the city lights. "Did you ever think it would end up like this?" she asked. I shook my head. Never. Then I smiled. But that's the best part, isn't it? In the weeks that followed, I handed off more power to women I trusted, trained them, backed away from every project that didn't feed my soul, and slowly I stepped into something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not the freedom to fight, the freedom to just be. I bought a cottage by the coast, spent mornings walking barefoot through tide pools and scribbling poetry into a new leather journal. Sometimes I worked, sometimes I didn't. The world didn't fall apart without me, because the systems I built didn't need me to survive. And that, in the end, was the truest sign of power. That I could walk away and still leave something behind that bloomed. One day, a letter arrived in soft cream paper. From a girl I didn't know. It said. They said I couldn't, that I wasn't enough, that my past defined me. Then I found your story, and I realized I was never the problem. Thank you, Ava Sinclair, for showing me that inheritance doesn't make a legacy. Action does. I folded the letter slowly, closed my eyes and whispered to the sea breeze outside my window, "You're welcome," because they tried to write me out of the will. But I had the final word, and it wasn't revenge. It was rebirth. Asterisk. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment "real revenge" so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know, where are you watching from? Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button. Comment your thought and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, stay happy.